So we've got George Dow, co-chairman of Green Christian, with us. Thank you. We're very excited to have you, George. And I just wondered if you would say a few words about yourself and then launch in.
Okay. Thank you very much, Stefan, and welcome everyone. It's lovely to see you. Yeah, I'm George Dow. I'm the co-chair of Green Christian alongside my fellow co-chair, who's Deborah Tompkins, who I saw today, and we had a cup of tea today in Penzance. There you go. And it's very, very lovely here at the moment. So there you go. It's Cornwall, isn't it? It's really good to be here. And just a little bit about myself as introduction, really. I joined Green Christian 14 years ago. And since that time, it's been very central to my Christian faith journey. It continues on like that too. And I recall Deborah at a recent workshop talk saying that Green Christian was her tribe. And I really get that. And I know exactly what she meant. It is that for me too. About 40 years I've spent in London working and living there. And my wife, Jacqueline, who's an Anglican lay reader, and myself, we moved to West Cornwall 3 years ago. And I'm now very much involved in my local church as a member of the worship group, the music worship group, the PCC, and the Deanery Synod, and all things Anglican, really. But not exclusively Anglican, because I'm also on the Cornwall Churches Environment Group, which is an ecumenical group. So that's a lovely thing to be on. I'm going to speak for approximately 25 minutes, and just a brief note on how I'll structure it. A few words, maybe around 3 minutes, on the way of life in general. Now, those of you who were at my first way of life talk, which was on the first way of life discipline, which is prayer and devotions, will have heard that bit before. So it's going to be very short, but some of you won't have been on that. So that might be interesting to hear. After that, I'll talk about the topic for this evening, which is living gently on the earth. And then thirdly, I'll cover the resources which Green Christian provides to help us in that journey. And then at the end, I'll share what I've personally found to be particularly useful. So that's what it's going to be sort of looking like over the next 25 minutes. So first, a few words on the way of life. This, as I've said, is the second Wednesday workshop between May and October of this year on the way of life, and each covering one of the 4 elements or spiritual disciplines of the way of life. Those are prayer and devotions, living gently on the earth, public witness, and encouragement. Now, the Green Christian way of life is offered to Green Christian members for whom care of God's creation in all its forms is a fundamental outworking of their faith. The way of life is calling for a deeper engagement and a shared encouragement. It's a way of life which focuses exclusively on creation care. Companions, I'll refer to them a couple of times, are those Green Christian members who have made a commitment to follow the way of life. Explorers are those who have expressed an interest but don't yet feel able to commit. Now, for both companions and explorers, we provide all sorts of things. We provide monthly letters. In fact, Alison is here. I think, Alison, I got your email today. Alison will be doing our next monthly letter, which will be coming out next week. Now, those aren't newsletters. They're basically letters by companions who talk about their journey and what they've been doing in recent times. So that's a real sharing and hopefully affirming and encouragement for others. We do that every month. Every 2 months, we've got used to them now, we do Zoom gatherings, and we've covered, and that's for companions and explorers, and we've covered the significance of art and poetry in our journeys, moving from the subversive to the mainstream, prayer and encouragement, the significance of stories, Lent reflections and actions, and the role of non-violent direct action in protest. The next one, which is next week on the 5th of July, will be on this very subject, living gently, where it will be explored in some depth by companions and explorers. We also normally, in non-COVID times, have an annual gathering, a personal face-to-face gathering, and hopefully we'll have that at the beginning of next year. That's January or February. So all those things are provided for companions and explorers. For companions only, we've established 16 regional encourager groups. So up till now, those who are meeting will have been meeting via Zoom. But after, hopefully, the 19th of July, the Zooms will continue, but also hopefully they'll be able to meet in groups in person. That'll be rather lovely. We have currently 64 companions. Okay, let's move on to the topic for this evening, living gently on the earth. Now, what do I mean by living gently on the earth? It's a beautiful phrase, isn't it? It has a poetic feel to it. And it's like the best poetry, it's not didactic. Now, what I mean by that, it's not intended to somehow teach us how to think and act in some sort of moral way. That would be a very arrogant position to take, to tell people how to do it. And for this reason, living gently for any one of us depends on a number of things. It depends on who we are, where we are in our journey, where we live, who we may live with, the opportunities and challenges we're facing during this time in our lives, the access to the natural world, countryside, parks, woodland, the availability of local shops and local food, the community in which we live, how financially rich we are in order to enable us to have choices on where and how we live and what we purchase, and a whole host of other things which may be unique to us. And for that reason, living gently on the earth must be a personal issue for each of us, and God. So, like readers of poetry or viewers of an abstract impressionistic painting, how we react depends on who we are. There are no comprehensive lists of do's and don'ts, no living gently manual. One can live gently in the middle of a city, and one can live gently in the middle of the countryside. I would suggest that we take that beautiful phrase, living gently on the earth, and rather than make it purely aspirational, try to see how we can somehow fit it into our day-to-day lives. It's in this way that it becomes part of who we truly are. Now, what resources can Green Christian offer to help us to live gently? Okay, I've said that there is no living gently manual and that it all depends on who we are. But there are some hopefully helpful suggestions made by Green Christian and a starting point for these is to be found on our resources web page, and specifically from one of our leaflets. Now, I'm not basing this whole talk on a leaflet by any means, but those leaflets, that screen, which will Staff and I'll put up in a minute, contains, I believe, a number of points which I think you'll find really helpful. The leaflet's called 9 Ways of Living Gently on the Earth. Now, that first page there is my old allotment in South London. And it looks like that photo was taken in summer sometime, because everything is completely out of control. There are weeds everywhere. And that person holding the spade is Jacqueline, my wife, bless her. Now, I'm not going to go through, actually, Staffan, could you just scroll down so that we were on the kind of middle page, as it were? Can you do that? Yeah, good. Keep going. That's it. Fantastic. Right. Okay, so what I'm going to do, if you start to go to the top of this page, super, that's it. Thank you very much. I'm going to go through, I'm not going to go through these in detail. You can do that for yourselves, and I'm sure you're already doing many of these things. And for any one of these 9 ways, there could almost be a separate workshop. But let's just go through them fairly quickly, and I'll share with you some of the things that I've been doing. That first one, stand up for the planet. In terms of way of life disciplines, this is really closest to the third one, which we call public witness. And of course, many Green Christian members have most recently contacted their MPs about the CEE bill, and some have gone on marches before and during the G7, and will do again, I'm sure, for COP26. And will also, quite separately, write letters to local papers and contact councillors and MPs about more local issues, such as perhaps saving a wildflower meadow from development. So basically, that particular discipline, which is public witness, which slots in here, I think, is really about, okay, we have done, if you like, we've prayed, and we've also tried to live gently, and now we're acting that out, and that we're saying, okay, how can we stand up for the planet? And that covers that first one. It's about action, really. Okay, the second one is get connected. And this fits best with the fourth discipline, which is encouragement. And so we can begin to see how the disciplines are integrated. Yes, seeking like-minded people locally, it mentions there. But sometimes it's difficult to do this on one's own and with no one else to turn to for support, either in our church or no obvious group in the wider community. So how can we share ideas and encourage each other in living gently in those circumstances? Here are 3 ways of doing this. The first one is Green Christian's online forum, C-Link. That's a members discussion group, which currently has 250 subscribers, with 640 messages posted last year on 566 topics. I had to look that up. But much of those will be on how we can live gently and sharing between members. It's lovely. The second way we can get connected is join one of Green Christian's local groups. Barbara may correct me later on this, but I think there's about 16, but there may be a little more. So that's Green Christian members who meet locally to discuss this sort of thing. And finally, get connected. We can do that by becoming a way of life companion, and you'd therefore be able to join with other companions in your region. And one of our 16 encourager groups, when companions share their way of life journeys, how they're going, looking at each of the 4 disciplines. The third one on the screen there is practice gratitude and generosity, simply simplify, be liberated by needing less. I love the way this is put. Practice gratitude and generosity. Practice implies that the more we do these things, the easier it becomes. And the other side of the coin is that if we don't practice, then it becomes increasingly hard to do, like an unused muscle in our bodies. The fourth one, be creative. It mentions there something which is, several things which are interesting. A clothes swap. I've been here 3 years in Penzance, and I've only just found out recently of the 4 churches which we are part of. They do an annual clothes swap, and it's a great way. You're possibly doing this anyway. A great way of bringing the church together and also overcoming the need to go out and buy things. 5 is reconnect with the natural world. I mentioned my allotment earlier on in this talk, and I miss it. I still miss it. I had it for about 12 years, but I miss it sometimes. I don't miss it in midwinter or when it's pouring, but I really miss it in spring and summer and autumn. And another thing that's mentioned there under number 5 is include earth in our church liturgies. And there's lots of stuff on that on our resources webpage on the website. Number 6 is use your LOAF. And this is something which I know is dear to us all. And I think, Barbara, you may well have come up with this acronym, I'm not sure, all those years ago, which stands for locally produced, organically grown, animal-friendly and fair-traded food. Now, one thing which I did do in my second year down here was that I introduced a program, a Lent program called LOAF for Lent. And that's a great way of getting your local church to start thinking green. That was really good for me. And I think probably I adapted that from something that was on our resources page on the website. Again, it was actually started up by another Green Christian member. And I adapted it for our church in our circumstances. So I'm sure it's still there. Number 7, travel light. We're all aware of this, walking, cycling, taking the bus, and so on and so forth. And number 8 actually is an interesting one, particularly at this time, isn't it? Explore. Could you? It's down the bottom here, isn't it, Staffan? Explore this island. And what with COVID, so many more people are getting involved in staycations. We actually managed to get away for 2 weeks to the Scilly Isles. That's our kind of local abroad here. You know, it's in the Atlantic by 23 miles, but that was absolutely glorious. And that final one is go fossil free and reduce use. I've been with Good Energy for about 15 years and no troubles whatsoever. It's sometimes more of a challenge, isn't it, to actually get your church to do this, but hopefully more churches are accepting of this. So one of the things that mentions, you don't have to go back, Staffan, but one of the things that's mentioned on the first page is why not tick the things that you already do and choose 1 or 2 things to work on each month out of those nine ways. I think that's really a good place to start. If you could close the shared screen now, Staffan, thanks very much for doing that. What do I personally find helpful out of those? I find all those things helpful. Even if I'm already doing quite a lot of them, I feel affirmed going through them. I read through the C-Link conversations on most days and occasionally participate in a discussion or start a new thread. I started a new thread recently on the network of trees, how they help each other and send each other signals underground. It's just a beautiful, beautiful. And there's so many new books on that. I actively listen when I hear something I feel may help me in my journey. I don't get everything right by any means, but I do think about, for example, whether I really need to buy something, and if so, how it was produced. If it seems very inexpensive, that sounds good, doesn't it? But what does that say about how much the maker of that item was paid, and how did it arrive in the shop? Was it from a long way away? Could it have been produced locally? Or even, could I try to make or grow this thing myself? And so on. And as for giving up things and feeling liberated, which one of those 9 ways said, a little personal example, which certainly wouldn't work in everyone's case. And believe me, honestly, is not intended to convey that I'm a particularly generous person, because I'm not really. But after years of considering giving up our old but reliable little car, we discovered that a family in our church was struggling with lack of transport as their own vehicle was in its last legs. So we just gave them ours, initially to use for a few weeks, and then just gave it to them. And it's really strange because of COVID, it was just out in the street for months. We used it 3 times in a year, I think. And we kind of adapted to that. So while there was a pang of sadness, we no longer had our beloved little rusting Nissan Micra, which had served us so well for so many years. But it felt good to have given some pleasure to someone else. And yes, I felt liberated. And now in my 70th year, I'm learning a lot from my middle-aged son about things. Stephen is a Buddhist and is developing his Dharma teaching in his local Buddhist center with other followers. And he continually offers me kindness. Sometimes when I'm having a conversation with him, I feel as if I'm being counseled, but counseled in a good way. I always feel better at the end of it. He truly is living gently. He's also vegan, I should say. I have heard it said that Christianity tells you what to believe, and that Buddhism can help in showing you how to live. I'm sure Thomas Merton believed this, and I'm beginning to believe this too. So I'm going to end now by showing you some books which I've found to be helpful in my own journey towards living a gentler life. The first one, I'm not going to hold up the Bible, but this is from the Bible, and it's something which all of you are, I'm sure, is so familiar with. It's Galatians 5:22 to 23, some of the most powerful words, I think, of Paul. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. The fruit of the Spirit has become a touchstone to living gently, certainly in my life. And it's like that old chestnut that we used to say a lot, and sometimes I still do to myself. What would Jesus do? I just find it so helpful. So I'm just going to share with you some books. I mentioned, actually I didn't, did I? I mentioned Buddhism. Well, this isn't Buddhism, but what it is something which you'll be very familiar with, which is mindfulness. And this is a book some of you may be familiar with. It's a book called Mindfulness, a practical guide to finding peace in a frantic world. It's by Mark Williams and Danny Penman. Mark Williams, only after reading the book, some years after reading the book, I discovered was actually a Christian. I didn't know that. He's actually a priest, an ordained priest. He's canon of Christ Church Cathedral in Oxford, and he says his language is beautiful, and he's based in Oxford, and he's all over YouTube. To have a look at what he has to say in YouTube. I found that particularly very helpful. It helps me to slow my mind down, and concentrate on the things which are immediately around me and are worthy of where my mind should go rather than jumping all over the place. I'm going to stick with mindfulness for 2 more books. This one, This one is called Mindfulness and Christian Spirituality by Tim Stead. Now, Tim Stead is an accredited mindfulness teacher and an Anglican priest. That's a lovely book. Really, really like that book. And just one more. And this is called How to Be a Mindful Christian by Sally Welch. Now, Sally Welch is a parish priest, an area dean in the Diocese of Oxford, and previously diocesan advisor on spirituality. Sorry to be very Anglican in some of this stuff. And she's the author of a number of books. It's really a kind of 40 simple spiritual practices to do with mindfulness and contemplation. I mentioned Buddhism, which my son is a Buddhist. One of my favorite authors is Thich Nhat Hanh. Some of you may be aware of this. I'm not sure this will really come out very well, but it's called Living Buddha, Living Christ. Thich Nhat Hanh was a great friend of the late Thomas Merton. And in fact, Thomas Merton used to say that he had a really close relationship with him, a better relationship with him than he had with many Christians. Thich Nhat Hanh is a Zen Buddhist master, and I went to see him 10 years ago in Friends Meeting House in Euston Road in London. And he said this, he said, and this is interesting, I think. He said, if you wish to live a gentler life, and I'm paraphrasing, there's no need to become a Buddhist. Look to your own tradition. It's all there. You know, we have so many contemplative practices in the heritage of the Christian faith, from the Desert Fathers onward, from before the Desert Fathers and onwards. And, you know, when you engage with deep contemplation, living gently in the earth is so much easier. I haven't got it worked out, but I do try to do these things. The Lives Around Us by Dan Papworth. I mentioned this during the prayer and devotions talk that I gave as well. That's one that we use a lot in Green Christian retreats in a reflection time. Dan is an author, spiritual director and facilitator at Cheltenham Forest Church. 2 magazines. I've taken this magazine, Resurgence, for, I don't know, probably the best part of 30 years. It's edited by Satish Kumar, and its strapline is Soil, Soul and Society. A beautiful magazine. And one other magazine, which if you want to go into this even more deeply, permaculture. I remember doing a design course some years ago, and again, that's a way of it's got living gently with the earth at its source. So I found that really helpful. 2 others. There's been an explosion of nature writing in the last 10 years, and how do I represent that best? Probably by a book by Robert Macfarlane, a great, fantastic writer. And this one is called The Wild Places. And finally, I always mention this, The Universal Christ by Richard Rohr. Just a beautiful, beautiful book. Richard Rohr isn't everyone's theological cup of tea, but he is mine. Jacqueline, the aforementioned Jacqueline, has been going on about him for years and giving me books, and I never read them. And I read this and it blew me away. And this is about Christ in everything and everyone. It's a beautiful, he said it's his ultimate book. So that's one there. So that was a relatively quick, I'm sorry if I've gone over 25 minutes. I'm not sure I have, perhaps I have. Run through an overview of the way of life. Some resources and support which Green Christian provides in living gently on the earth in a personal perspective, what's really important in my own life. I hope you found at least some of this helpful. I'd be really interested to find out about what you have found helpful in your own lives. So thanks very much for staying with me during this. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much, George. That was really, you could keep going actually, so you don't need to stop. I think it's worth saying that the books you mentioned, I've got on. You sent me a handout, and I will send a link to that to everyone after this, so you can follow up, and you won't lose any of that. So what would be really good would be to hear people's views and their questions and their examples and what resounded for them. You know, we won't go into it. Let's do it together, because there's not too many of us today. So not you know. So open up. You know, if you want to speak, pick your hand up or put your virtual hand up, and we'll take you from there. So, any feedback? Yes, that's Jess, I think, and after that, Susan. So, Jess, you need to go off mute.
Yes, I certainly took on board what's been said about the personal, because all our lives are different. So I took that on board very much, but there is a sort of caveat with that, because it's not always easy to be completely honest with ourselves, and there may be things that we could do, but either consciously or almost subconsciously we kind of pop them away. And I think this is where a group like Green Christian is useful, because it does sort of perhaps put really good ideas in front of us, so that we can think, could I do that? But quite often it's good to have a very honest friend who, if you're saying what you're doing and what you hope to do, they might say to you, yeah, what about, which can set you thinking on another tack. I don't know whether everybody agrees with me about that, but we can get a bit, oh, this is what I do, this is what I can do, maybe this is what I hope to do. But I think the point about not just being aspirational about it, but kind of getting on with it. Thank you.
George, have you a perspective on that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jess. That's a really acute, I think, observation. And I think that's one of the things when we were coming up with this concept of the way of life all those years ago, and we were thinking, well, A, would this be helpful for Green Christian members? And B, well, what should it comprise? And one of the very, very important parts of that is encouragement. And that's why we try to do this in so many different ways. And of course, the best way to do that is not necessarily, I mean, this is hopefully a good way to do it, to get people thinking about it, but it's actually to get together with other people. And this is why we've set up a number of regional groups. And Zoom has made this easier as well. And lots of groups are actually meeting, I think, through that. But it's only by talking about your way of life journey, and what I mean by that, and it might be talking about particular disciplines, prayer, there may be a problem with that, or a challenge, a barrier, and actually sharing that with other people who are basically on the same path, or I should say, they're heading in the same direction. We're all in different paths, but we're heading in the same direction, and there's a kind of common language that we know, that we understand. We don't have to explain it. We're already, perhaps not in the deep end, but we're treading towards the deep end together. And to be able to actually share not only the good things, but the stuff that we're finding very, very difficult, authentically. And that's, I think that's exactly your point. So thank you very much.
Yes.
I don't know if anyone else has any.
Well, we bring Susan in a moment, but Jess, does that work for you?
Yes, I think that's, I mean, I've got a particular reason for wanting to get plenty of advice at the moment, which I won't bore you with, but yeah, it is. I think talking to other people and knowing that there are other people who probably have the same sort of struggles or different struggles, and talking through them, I think is, thank you.
Would anyone else like to sort of explore that theme before we ask Susan to come in? Susan.
Yes, thank you. I totally agree with Jess, and one of the reasons I came in this evening was because I thought it would challenge me in perhaps different ways. But I have a question really. About 10 years ago, our church worked towards being an eco-congregation, and we got our award, and that was great. And we've done little things since, but I just get the feeling that as I talk to people, their eyes glaze over a bit when I'm talking about these things, and they know me and they know my sort of interests, and I would like some help really in how to engage people in the next stage, because we did have a little leaflet which we all looked at, and we ticked the things we were doing, and we felt very pleased with ourselves. But it's all gone very quiet, and I feel somehow I'd love to be able to G things up a bit. Any suggestions?
Can I just come in here just quickly? Thanks very much, Susan. I really empathise with that, and I think probably most people empathise with seeing that glazing of the eyes. Mm. About 15 years ago, 3 churches ago, when I lived in South London, and we took our church, a very small group of 4 of us, 4 or 5 of us, kind of led the church to eco-congregation as well. That got the eco-congregation, and it was a very big deal. And we actually met in a school. That was quite a big school, and the head teacher came to. We got a tree. We planted a cherry tree, and it was great, and it made the diocesan newsletter and so on and so forth. And right. I don't know. We then moved on to another church, and about 3 years later, I was passing that outside the school, and I thought, I wonder if that cherry tree is still there. And of course, no one had done anything about it whatsoever. So, which is a great shame. But yeah, I'm not sure I have a great answers to this one. I mean, perhaps others have. How to keep that whole thing going? That enthusiasm. How do you keep it going? Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I can see Lizzie and then Bernice with hands up. That's the 2 I can see. So Lizzie.
And Tom had a suggestion in the chat.
And Tom. Yeah, okay.
It might be something you've thought about, but I've been discovering recently there are all sorts of days throughout the year or months to do things. Perhaps a slightly less exciting one is it's plastic free month in July, but there's just been a whole month of rewilding, which was the Wildlife Trust's project, and it was wonderful. I downloaded the PDF and it was just full of all lovely things that you could do. It was called Go Wild in June, and one was follow a bee, and one was go and listen, just walk in the forest and listen to the noises, paint what you see, but things you could do with children. So I don't know if that might be useful, because sometimes finding activities that you can build the work around might be fun. It's the sort of, I'm thinking of myself because I'm really struggling at the moment with my own church, but I think God watered the seed this week, because I found out from our leader we've actually got a green champion in the church, and he gave me his name. So I'm going to have a chat with that person.
For any answers, could I ask you to bear in mind that perhaps 80% of our church are over 75. We really are a very old church, because we have a very new evangelical group near us, and all the families go there. So, we're working against the odds, really.
We'll have a look, because there's some.
Yes, thank you for that.
Yeah, like
what do you look for?
Look up environmental days of the year would be a good one, and then you'll get a calendar. But quite a few of them are passive. It might be doing a prayer.
Yes, yeah.
Car free week for sustainability week. That might not suit them, but they could maybe car share or something.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, Bernice.
Yes, I was just going to say there's a couple of us in Sway are leading our eco-church group, and we bounce ideas off each other and sometimes feel a bit despondent that not many people respond. We've got some good groups that do the church garden, for example, but what we've done lately is try to promote through the newsletter in advance that perhaps we might do a litter pick before the carnival's coming up soon, or we're by the forest, so we go and do a forest clean. And the first group, there were three. The first time there were 3 of us. The last time there were 8 of us. And now people are saying, oh, let us know if you want to do another one. We'd love to come. And I know what you're saying about an elderly congregation. I think it's the same for most churches, and our congregation is the same. I don't know whether perhaps some of your elderly congregation are able to walk a bit, but I mean, we've had some 80-year-olds coming out on litter picks and thoroughly enjoying just for the social event.
Our town is so clean because so many people go out litter picking. There are so many civic-minded people that it's not necessary. It's just so clean.
Maybe you could do a litter drop.
Somewhere else.
To suggest people can go and pick it up. But the other thing is we're trying to arrange a bring and share vegetarian or vegan supper for the and the vicar's just agreed to it. We wanted to do it in September, but she's suggesting harvest weekend as our harvest supper, which is great. So we're starting with our church community, but opening it up to the whole of our village community as well.
And using the LOAF principle, are you doing that?
Yes, we will be. We're trying to focus on low foods, yes. So, I mean, what's great is being able to try and open up to people who aren't at church to get some new interest.
Thank you.
George, have you any more thoughts on that?
There are also, I was just picking up in something Lizzie was saying, that there are particular times of the year. I mean, for instance, we have this Creation Sunday, there's Climate Sunday, there's Creation Tide from the 1st of September, I think, to the first couple of weeks.
4th of October.
Yeah, absolutely.
Francis Day.
Absolutely, yeah. So perhaps I was trying to think of perhaps particularly for elderly people who perhaps can't go out and do lots of physically active things.
I think
yeah, sorry, I was just going to say that to absorb living gently into the liturgy, into a service, and there's good reasons for doing that these days, because everyone has heard of COP20. Well, they will have heard of COP26, and everyone has heard of G7, and everyone knows the impact of the climate crisis, and to somehow absorb those things into to the prayers, to the reading, to the to the sermons and so on.
Perhaps
I must have a word with our minister. I think that's an important thing now. Thank you.
No, it's okay. And Susan, just before I'll stop in a second, but there's lots of stuff on the Green Christian website and the resources page on liturgy and lots of other things. And in fact, I think Barbara, the 26 prayers for COP26, which Reverend John Swales from Leeds has come up with, and graciously and kindly and freely given permission to put that on the website. That's freely available, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. Go to the website and look for the 26 page and click on the prayers. And John Swale's beautiful their lamentations for the earth.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Could I ask Tom? Tom, you had a couple of ideas, which I think is just worth vocalising. Would you mind doing that?
Yeah, happy to. So I'm going to say something controversial first.
Good.
I think litter picks are an abomination, and the reason I say that in that controversial way is I just don't think. I think they shouldn't need to happen. And I know everybody knows that, And I just want to think, and if anybody's got any ideas, that a litter pick never has to happen ever again in this country, I would love, because I just think it's possible for that to be the case. And it seems like it's the go-to community bonding when really just shouldn't happen in the first place, that 15-year-olds are dropping, and it is mostly late teens that are doing it. Well, it is in South London. And so I just would love ideas how we encourage the average teenager that they don't need to drop litter. And for the record, I don't think dropping litter is the greatest marker of moral virtue or immorality either. But as I was chatting with my friend Tony this morning, that George knows, it is an indicator of a mindset. So leaving my controversial statement aside, the encouragement I put in the chat for Susan was Joy and Enough have launched a course called Plenty, and that could be, if you had some enthusiasm in the past, it could be a way, along with your minister's encouragement, endorsement, to say, let's run this course, which is all online in terms of the downloadable material, and it could be a way of activating people's previous enthusiasms and re-engaging them to actively think and then live out some of the things the course encourages, and possibly things they actually want to be doing anyway if they were just given the opportunity to think and had others alongside them to say, let's do this, let's change the way we live. And then and the hard work's been done for you in terms of questions, ideas, and much of it, from what I can see, is what George has encouraged us with this evening in terms of the 9 ways of living gently on the earth. It's expanding that.
Could you repeat the name of the course, please? I didn't catch it.
It couldn't be more simple. Plenty.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Ruth,
I think.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
If you go on the website,
now.
you'll see it, and it's of course designed. You can do it by Zoom, but it's designed to be used very much in person. So again, it's ideal for house groups.
It's a matter of persuading our cell group to actually do it, because we have done courses in the past linked, and I can see them saying not again. You know.
It's a very, very interesting point. Ruth, you made a really interesting comment in the chat. Would you mind explaining that to us and just taking us through that? Would that be okay?
I was just reading Rob Hopkins today, and that was literally one of the things that he says, and I think that's been a bit my experience. I think, you know, there's a huge defensiveness in people against environmentalists, and I think environmentalists do it wrong, actually. And I think they've done it wrong for years, and it feels a tragedy to me, because they tell you what to do and how to do things, and actually that turns people off. And it creates defensiveness. So I just think that's a real bad start, actually. And I think if people are jaded already with do a litter pick, do a this, be a green church, blah, then actually you've got to re-engage them in a completely different way. What we're actually trying to do is regenerate their love for the earth. So actually any other activity that is not under the label of environmentalist is useful to me.
That is
something like a cultural, and I think culture is where we begin to question things, where we challenge things, where we see things differently. You know, I think anything that can get art in front of people, poetry, music, visual, anything that gets people able to reflect on an issue and see it from a different perspective is where we will get change. You know, and it doesn't have to be, you know, go away and do this at the end, but we have to have a deeper trust that change will grow when we generate a different way of seeing the world and being in the world.
Here, I'm like cheering. You're absolutely right. There's this. I mean, to me, I've been one of those, and it's what Laudato Si talks about: ecological conversion. You suddenly start to get it, that your very faith id is about the wonder of creation and the connectedness that George was talking about. What do you think, George?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ruth. I think that's so right. I love Rob Hopkins. Yeah, and we had him. You probably know we had him as one of the key speakers at our online festival last year, talking about his book about reimagining. You know, what rather than what is, what if, you know, and actually painting that positive picture rather than lots of negatives. And I hope I took on board, I think, what you were saying there about rather than, I think I said during the talk about not having a living gently manual that you must do this and you mustn't, you know, that is not going to work. So all of those things on that leaflet, which I think are very, very helpful things actually, and get you thinking and get you discussing, is not a you must do and you must not do. It's very much it depends where you are, you know, who you are, and ultimately, you know, what your relationship with God is. You know, what does gentleness mean in one of those fruits of the Spirit? What does it mean? It's a lovely word, isn't it? What does living gently mean? So it's really for you where you are in your journey, in your town, at your time of life. So there is no way we can be judgmental of anyone else. I feel personally, I think that's a bad place to start. And we really need to be talking about the positives. Yeah.
Brilliant. Wow. Wow. Now, we haven't heard from a few people, and I'm keen to have the chance. So Anthony, Vanessa, Judith, Jeffrey, Ellen, Sarah, have you anything? Alison, yeah. Alison, please, yeah.
I'm sorry to say that my letter for the companions that I've just written starts off with litter picking, and but I make no apology for it, because actually going out, I've always picked up litter from a child, but in lockdown I got out every day and I got more equipment, and I've connected with so many people, and it's really helped me in my mental health. And I think of litter droppers in a way that Jesus supported with you. I think you'll probably always have litter droppers, and they're not just young people. But I think engaging with people, making them feel valued, helping them to connect, because I see a lot of the litter, the extra litter, and I'm on a Facebook page, it shows the litter all over the country. It's just horrendous, and I think it's worse in the pandemic. I think because people feel angry and entitled to worry about things. So the more we can listen, and George is right about not judging. We have no idea why people do these things. I've given up asking why. But I think that just a connection with people and drawing out those who will join us, that to me is a very good thing.
George, can I ask you for a sort of a final comment before we close in prayer? We can continue discussing after, but we want to let people escape a date.
Okay, thank you very much, Stefan. Look, thank you very much for attending this evening. I think it's been a really stimulating discussion, and I only found out from Barbara just before that we're up against in the competition with Andy Murray on television. It could have been worse. It could have been last night in England.
Yes.
So I really thank you very, very much for coming along. I love this stuff because I learn so much, you know. I've learned, you know, I've learned gentle disagreements, and that's the way to have that discussion, I think. And there is no perfect way to do this. And I think it's that balance we talked about earlier, really, between aspiration. You know, we're not perfect at these things, living gently. But for it not to be purely aspirational, is to take some bits of that we really understand of living gently and actually bringing it into our day-to-day lives. And for Alison, thank you for mentioning that about litter picking, that's really important for you and many others, and thank you for doing that. And whereas it might be something completely different than living gently for someone else, so it's a very waffly way to wind it up, but I just say thank you very much for coming along. And Tom, it's really nice to see you again. And in a separate time, we'll talk about how Dulwich Hamlet's doing. But for the moment, what were you going to say?
I'm not trying to condemn the litter pickers, because one of my closest neighbours and friends has picked probably more litter in my patch of South London than anyone I know.
We totally get that, Tom. I think
it's just
the point is really well made, but it's not needed, and I completely understand that. So let's we can continue that just after we release people.